Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Audit Committee of Allerdale Borough Council. My name is Lee Jardine and I'm the host and the Democratic Services Officer. I will not have any control over the meeting and the meeting will not begin until instructed by the Chair. This meeting is currently being live streamed on YouTube and a recording will be made available afterwards. Everyone who has indicated they're attending today has now joined and the meeting will be locked. Shortly I'll hand you over to the Chair, but first, introductions. Can I ask the attendees to introduce themselves, starting with the members? Councillor Bainbridge.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Bainbridge.
Councillor Campbell-Savers.
Councillor Campbell-Savers.
Councillor King.
Councillor King.
Councillor Kirkbride.
Councillor Kirkbride, good afternoon.
Councillor Tyson. You appear to be on mute, Councillor Tyson.
Councillor Alan Tyson, good afternoon.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the officers. Sharon Sewell.
Good afternoon, Sharon Sewell, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Catherine Nicholson.
Good afternoon, Catherine Nicholson, Head of Financial Services and Section 151 Officer.
Barry Lennox.
Good afternoon, Barry Lennox, Financial Services Manager and Deputy Section 151 Officer.
Paula McKenzie.
Good afternoon, Paula McKenzie, Assurance Risk and Audit Officer.
Thank you. We also have our colleagues on the phone from Grant Thornton. Gareth Kelly.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Gareth Kelly, Director from Grant Thornton. I am your External Audit Engagement Lead. Thank you.
Thanks for all your introductions. Please can participants remain on mute throughout the meeting. If a vote is required, the Chair will ask myself to go through each member alphabetically and each member will reply with a name and I vote for, against or abstain. So thanks for that. I'll now formally hand you over to the Chair to start the meeting.
Right. Thank you, Lee. So my name's Alan Tyson again, and I'm chairing this meeting of the Audit Committee. So welcome, everyone. Now to the first item on the agenda, which is the minutes to sign as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on 29th of September 2020. Do I have a proposal to accept the minutes?
Chair, could I just ask a quick question about the minutes?
Yes, certainly.
A genuine question about the accuracy of 143. It says in there, in response to further questions, the monitoring officer confirmed that the process was under review with the Section 151 officer and that Councillor Campbell-Savers would be provided with a written response before the next meeting of the Constitution Review Group. That may be the case, Chair. I've just wondered if any of the members can recall whether that was actually what was agreed. Either way, I'm not sure that I've received a written response. If I have, I've overlooked it and I'm sorry. Perhaps the monitoring officer could confirm.
Yes, minute 78, I think, was in the, it was in the July meeting. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Campbell-Savers, apologies. What we did was arrange a meeting between myself, Councillor Campbell-Savers and the Section 151 officer and discuss that. So we could note that in today's minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, so can someone propose acceptance of the minutes?
Councillor Bainbridge has indicated she'll propose, Chair. And Councillor Campbell-Savers has indicated he'll second. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
Correct, yes.
Right, thank you. So we can proceed to item 2, which is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies for absence today from Councillors Armstrong and Councillor Hodson. Thank you.
Okay. Item 3, declaration of interest. Councillors are staff to give notice of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interest, or any other interest, and the nature of that interest relating to any item on the agenda in accordance with the adopted Code of Conduct.
We have no indications, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Lee. Questions. Item 4. To answer questions from members of the public submitted in writing or by electronic mail no later than 5 p.m., 2 working days before the meeting.
We haven't received any questions, Chair.
Right, thank you, Lee. So we can move on to item 5, which is on page 3, I think it is. Not page 3. Pages 7 to 16.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 5 is the Assurance Risk and Audits Performance Report for the quarter ending the 30th of September, which is our quarter 2. As it states in the report, it's to report to the committee on the work that the team have been doing within that quarter 2. Moving on to the report, the first item for members' consideration is the time summary. And I'm happy to take any questions from the members via the chair if there's any questions on that. However, from an audit point of view, there's nothing that we need to report on that isn't what would be expected at this time of the year. Obviously, we've had COVID tasks to do as a team, and as we go through the report, you'll see the update on the resource within the team. And obviously, in this report, Appendix 1, we have the revised plan.
Right, thank you, Paula. Are we all happy that Paula, you don't intend to go through the report by items?
I do intend to go through the report. I was just holding out to see if there was any questions via yourself, Chair, on that particular time summary table. Oh,
right. No, I noticed. Well, the main thing I noticed is that the time is about, the percentage time is about right, but of course there are only the actual number of chargeable days on the time summary are down to round about. Should be able to find it somewhere. I think it's down to about 80 odd. Yes. And basically, there's only you who's actually available for chargeable time on audit at the moment over the next 6 months.
Yeah, I think it might be better if I go through the entire report, Chair, and then anyone can ask questions, because it may give more background as to what's happening within the department.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, okay.
So if I move on, as you can see, the cumulative performance in quarter 2 is 78%, which is above our planned target of 73.72, which is very good for the department, considering the issues we've had in the last few quarters with the resource. The revised plan, which is for members' consideration at today's meeting, is at Appendix 1. And that's taken into consideration the fact that currently we have a vacant management post, and currently our internal auditor post is seconded to grants. So because of that, we've lost a considerable amount of days, and so we've had to revise our plan in accordance with that. Due to the reduction in days, as you can see at 2.4, that means we've had to take from the plan the risk management follow-up, the ethics and culture follow-up, and the GDPR review that was planned. Moving to 2.45, sorry, you can see that we have got external support from the Merseyside Internal Audit Agency, and they will be doing our finance review for this year, as well as our ICT review, which they do for us every year. I have also asked for additional support from the governance support assistants, and Lee has kindly agreed that with me and them. So we're hopefully having a meeting this week to discuss the way forward with that support.
Can I ask a question at this stage, Chair?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Campbell-Savers.
The sections in 2.4 that have been chosen to not be included in 20 to 21, what's the basis for those particular areas? Could you give us a little bit more background around that?
Of course. It's all done on a risk-based approach. So we have a matrix, and the ones that are of a lower risk, obviously they're the ones that get kind of moved to the bottom. As well as that, it was a little bit simpler this time round because the risk management and the ethics and culture were never on the plan as full reviews. They were only on the plan as follow-up items this plan. So therefore, it was only going to be a 2-day follow-up exercise that we were going to do on those two. It will still be followed up, but it will be done within the agreed actions. I think it was also quite, it worked out quite well for us because our risk management from last year and our culture and ethics, as you'll find out as we go on with the report, have actually just been finished. So we can still use the assurance that we got via those reviews, full reviews, onto next year's assurance report. So actually it did work out quite well this time, but normally all is done on a risk matrix approach.
Thank you for that.
Right, thank you. So could you continue, please, Paula?
Of course, Chair. So moving on to the point 3, which is the assurance and consultancy activities. I can confirm to the committee that ethics and culture is now completed and the final report has went out. So therefore that final report will come to the next committee. Finance is near completion. There is just one recommendation that needs agreed. And the reason it hasn't been agreed as yet is due to the changes within the organisation. We're looking at the best way that we can move forward with that because some of the things that the recommendation entails are actually going to be changing when the organisation moves forward with the new reorganisation. So that there is a meeting planned to discuss that next week. So hopefully by next committee that will be completed. But the review is completed. It's just the finalisation of the recommendations that needs agreed. I've also been involved within this quarter in the control meetings for the grants and for the fraud work that's done around the grants for the local businesses that have had to close due to COVID-19. And I think that's that section covered. So any questions I'm happy to take. If not, I'll move on to the corporate fraud.
Okay, is there a question on section 3? If not, I'd like to ask a question on 3.2. the corporate risk management and the risk management facilitation, which seems to have moved under with Emma Thompson to the Allerdale Local Focus Hub role. How there would still seem to be a need for the audit committee to find to have the findings of this. I realise they go to the main management team as well, but is there a capability there for getting the findings of the work on corporate risk management and risk management to us? Could I ask, or is it more that it goes to scrutiny?
Do you want to take this one, Sharon, or?
Sorry, we both went at the same time. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the same information that's previously come to the Audit Committee will still come to the Audit Committee, and any workshops that we've had previously, we have had facilitated workshops on risk management for the Audit Committee will still continue. And the audit team, Paula, and the team will still support that too.
Right, thank you, Sharon. So your sub item 4 on corporate fraud, Paula.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing further to add in regards to the NFI. It's all running along smoothly. Nearly all the data sets have been submitted. We're just waiting for our final one, which the deadline is the end of this month. And then obviously the processing of that work and the matches will be done in late January, early February. So all's going well in regards to the NFI.
Right, thank you. Any questions? No? Well, what about progress on the annual plan, item 5?
Progress with the annual plan. As I reported earlier, the culture and ethics review is now completed. Finance getting to the very end stages, hopefully after our meeting next week, that will be able to be completed and sent as final report. Moving on to management's acceptance of recommendations. I do have an update for members on those. As you can see, the report states that there's 11 actions overdue. Out of those 11, 9 were 50% or above on completion. And the update is as follows. I can confirm that we've had no response from Development Services. That is still outstanding, as members will recall from the last meeting also. So we've had no response or update in Q1 or Q2 on those agreed actions. Cash management, I haven't received an update for this quarter. However, I will report that the responsible officer has been on leave, so they haven't been able to respond, and she is very good at responding. So I do feel like there will be an update on that, which I will send to members separately. Asset management, again, unfortunately, it's the same as Development Services. We've had no response. We also didn't receive a response in Q1. So again, I have no update for members on that. Economic growth has been updated and the deadline has been extended to the end of Q3, and that's due to other priorities and work commitments and issues with COVID work that have happened. So we are happy with that one. Governance have all been updated and we have one completed, and the 2 others that aren't completed, they are at 80%. And the only reason that they are not on the completed list is because the work is ongoing. So it's due to training up the governance support assistants, and that is happening as that work progresses. So once all of that training is done, we can make them completed. Procurement and finance have both been 100% completed, so they're no longer outstanding. So for
Chair,
members,
can I ask a question, please?
yeah,
Can I ask about the development services and the asset management? You've had no word back from them. What
No.
can be done so that we can get an update of what's going on? Can we ask them to come to the meeting? Can we do something? Because obviously there's outstanding issues and nobody's coming back to you on them. And obviously you can only ask so many times.
so members have two options, and one of them is to escalate it to SMT, and the other option to members is to ask them to attend the committee to ask them to provide that update.
Okay.
Right. I understand Sharon would like to speak on this.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to make the point that the two heads of service for them areas are on the call now. So myself and Catherine can take that action to get an update on them outstanding matters for you as soon as possible.
Right, thank you. Yeah, it's, I know it's, well, of course, Paula's on her own at the moment, and to have to do chasing around on all these actions is a little bit much, really. Yeah, thank you, Sharon, for that.
Alan, can I also ask a further question? Because Paula is on her own, and
Yes, certainly.
she's actually doing the work of 3 different people. What is happening with putting someone else in post? What are we doing? Because obviously there's only so much you can do. And with the COVID situation as well, it must be putting an enormous pressure on the audit department. And I just wondered what the council is doing at the moment to try and alleviate this situation.
Right, thank you, Mary. Sharon, could you come back on that at all, please?
Yes, of course I can. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bainbridge. As Paul has previously set out in the report, we've looked at the plan and amended the plan accordingly in accordance with the hours that we've got. We've got support through the governance support assistance. We've got external support to assist Paula with the audits, and we are actually going out to recruitment at the moment, and I'll keep members updated on that.
Right, thank you, Sharon. Okay.
Chair, Councillor Campbell Service wishes to come in.
Chair, back to the issue of there being no response to these recommendations and no updates on progress. Would it be appropriate at the point that the agendas are sent out for any areas where Paula hasn't received responses or can identify any progress for the relevant officers to automatically be invited to future audit committee meetings?
Yes, I would ask Sharon to come in on that, really, because I mean, certainly you know, it's right that I think the officers realise that, you know, it is holding someone up from doing the job in not seeing actions run out. So yeah. So could you comment on that, Sharon, on are we entitled to ask officers to come to the committee to explain why actions aren't completed?
Yeah, what we can do is myself and Paula can sit down before the agenda goes out, and we can have a discussion with you, Chair, on that, depending on what's on the agenda, etc. And obviously we could look at the officers or the heads of service attendant if that's what was felt was necessary.
Yeah, my past experience in industry, it usually works, actually. Right, thank you. So it's all yours, Paula.
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme, obviously there's not a huge update since the last committee. Training has still kind of been slow because of the remote working and virtual meetings. However, I am happy to report that I did get agreement to go forward with my CIA qualification. So hopefully, all being well, that will start in April. Moving on to risk management. As stated at 3.2, corporate risk management and the risk management facilitation no longer sits with assurance, risk and audit, and has moved to the hub manager's role. As Sharon updated the committee on earlier, she obviously is going to still communicate and get that information to the committee. And obviously auditor always here to help if there's any issues. The corporate risk register is attached to the report, and that's available for all members to view as and when they want to. If there's no questions on that area, I can move.
No, I think that's, well, I take it not anyway. Yeah.
Councillor Campbell serve as chair.
So the second reference again to the risk management facilitation no longer sitting with the ARAT. From our perspective, it is effectively, there's no change though. Everything will still flow into this committee, and we can still have the local focus hub manager attend these meetings where appropriate to deal with those matters.
Yeah, that's correct. Councillor Campbell serves.
Could I just, because the local hub management comes up in the time summary as well. Whose time is that's being referred to there? The actual days booked of 45.68. Is that yours, Paula? Are you supporting the hub as well, or is that time that's previously been booked by Emma?
Yeah, it was previous time, so we have to keep it within the summary timesheet because it's an annual timesheet, and that's what the days are based on. However, those days were when Emma done half of her job within audit and half of her time in the hub, and so she had to obviously quantify that time because it was no longer in audit days. However, if you've noticed from the last agenda and this one, there's been no time added because Emma went to her full-time post as hub manager in September. So no time has been recorded against that since then, but it has to stay until April.
Okay, no, thank you. And sorry for running off then. My laptop told me it was going to shut down and there was a loose connection on the adapter. So sorry about that. I was listening.
Okay. So could you just run through Appendix 1 for us in terms of what you'll be doing for the rest of this year then, Paula, please?
Of course. So we've had to adapt the plan, as you can see, because obviously days were significantly reduced. We've tried to keep as much as we can within that plan, obviously, because we do need to provide our annual assurance statement at the end of the year. So as you can see, I am the ARAO, the Assurance Risk and Audit Officer. And so everything that there's days allocated in that row, so for example, I will still be undertaking the revenues and benefits review. And as you can see, there's 20 days allocated. I will be doing the cash management review, the Allerdale Waste Services review, and then everything else is just estimated days in hopefully what we'll spend. Obviously, as members can see, it is just a brief estimate of days because things are always going to crop up that haven't been planned for. So we just do our best to allocate those days as we can. However, as you will probably see in the next quarter, those days will be, can significantly be different, but we just have to adapt as that priority work comes in. For example, there's nothing allocated to the grant and fraud work. However, that's pieces of work that have came up, and that's why certainly from the Institute of Internal Audit, they have recommended that audit departments have a more flexible rolling audit plan currently due to obviously everyone's going through the same circumstances.
Right, thank you, Paula. So, I mean, basically that takes us down to item 11, which is recommendations. And can I ask that the report is accepted subject to any additional information that the committee may require, and also that the revised plan is accepted? If I could have a proposer and a seconder for that. And I think mainly the information that we would require is basically on the follow-up from the audit, the actions not completed for the next meeting. So do we have anybody else with a hand up or like to say anything? No. Sharon, your hand's still up. Did you want to come in?
Apologies, Chair. I'll take that down.
Oh, you've said enough. Okay. Right. So could I then have a proposal and a seconder for this report for item 5?
I propose it. Okay.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. So that's it, that we accept the report subject to the additional information that we require and we've mentioned, and the revised plan. Fine. So agenda item 6. Starting on page 17 is the annual governance statement.
Thank you, Chair.
Apologies, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. That's my item, the annual governance statement. As members are aware, we had the draft annual governance statement at the meeting, the audit meeting in July, and members approved that as a draft. And following discussions, following the audit and discussions with Grant Thornton, we've made some changes. So I was just going to take you through the changes we've made, not the full statement, because obviously we've been through that, but I was going to take you through the amendments. So the first one, there's been detail on the group control environment added, and that's to paragraphs 5.4 and 5.5.
Yes.
And they're covering the governance arrangements relating to the Allerdale Investment Partnership and the Allerdale Waste Services. So 5.4 covers the Allerdale Investment Partnership, and we're just adding there that we have a management agreement in place which sets out the governance framework. And at the moment, currently, the partners are undertaking a review of the management agreement to ensure that it continues to deliver the agreed outcomes and safeguards the interests of both partners. And then the outcome of that review will ensure that any improvements are implemented. And then 5.5, it just sets out that the council has established Allerdale Waste Services, and it was established in 2019. There were a number of detailed executive reports setting up the governance arrangements. The governance arrangements, as you'll recall, were established with the advice of external expert lawyers, and in its capacity as 100% shareholder of Allerdale Waste Services Limited, the council exercises control and oversight over ASWL and has a number of powers reserved to it over the key business decisions. We've got, as members will be aware, we've established a shareholder committee, which is a body that represents the council's interests as a sole shareholder, and that provides a simple mechanism with which the council can engage with the board of the Allerdale Waste Services Limited. In addition, we have a project meeting, including members and lead officers of both Allerdale Waste Services Limited and the council. So we set out the robust governance arrangements for the company.
Right. Sharon, could I just ask you a question at this stage? You were running through the AIP and the AWS, but in the recommendations I thought that Grant Thornton made, there were two items, 2.6 and 2.7, which I expected to find in, and 2.8 and 2.9 regarding the corporate peer challenge and the Centre for Public Scrutiny governance thing. Did you decide not to accept those, or?
No. Sorry, Chair. I'll run through them all. Sorry, I haven't done them. In the order of the paragraph.
But they're not in the report. That's why I'm asking. That's in the 2.6 and 2.7 and 2.8 and 2.9. The first one.
4.26 is 4.26.
No, it's right up front, I think. What I'm looking for, it was, is it 4.26?
Yes.
No, I've got what I've got against it, and I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2.6 and 2.7, the corporate peer challenge, and 2.8 and 2.9, the Centre for Public Scrutiny.
Yeah. 4.26 is the corporate peer challenge, and that continues into 4.27. And then 4.28 is the governance review by the Centre for Public Scrutiny, and 4.29 continues on that. Have I put that incorrectly in the report?
4.26
on page 28 of the annual governance statement, Chair.
Yes, I got it as para 2.6, to undertake a corporate peer challenge. Yeah, that's right. And what I'm saying is, 4.28 and 29. Yes, I've got it as 2.8. Sorry, 4.28 and 29. Yes, all right. I'm sorry. Yes, somewhere I've got confused by the numbering.
No problem, Chair. Do you want me to just touch on that one now then? Because as you say, that is they are two changes that have been made since the draft. So it's just more details. So whereas we mentioned that we had the corporate peer challenge through the LGA in 4.26, we've just put more details in 4.27 around what's actually being undertaken since the peer challenge, including a new council strategy, which was approved in December, setting out the clear 10-year strategy and priorities for the council, the delivery plan, the medium-term financial plan was updated, and the further work on undertaking and developing the council's transformation programme. So there is more detail set out there in 4.26 and 4.27 on the corporate peer challenge. If members want more detail, further detail, I can certainly make that available. And then 4.28 and 4.29, whereas they referred to the governance review carried out by the Centre for Public Scrutiny in February 2020. We just put a bit more detail again in there around the actions, the recommendations that came through that, a number of them being around additional member training, improving the scrutiny role, engagement with members, and engagement with the community, and the action plan that's in place for the governance review is actually being undertaken by the Constitution Review Group, and that will be reported to Council. So
That's fine. Thank you. The problem was I'd got them marked down as 2.8 and 2.9 instead. Wrong from somewhere, but that's fine. Thanks for pointing them out to me. Yeah.
thank you, Chair. And then the other changes are 5.10 and 6.1, and that's just that overall being set out, confirming that the council has appropriate systems and processes in place to ensure good governance is maintained. And then at 6.1 also, there's been a table added which summarises the significant governance issues identified in relation to corporate procurement and contract management,
Yes.
and a brief action plan. Again, if members want any further information around that, I can certainly furnish that after the meeting.
Right. Okay. And basically that's the conclusion. Have we any questions on that report? No.
Chair.
Silence sounds as if we haven't.
Yeah, Chair.
So
if I can come in, Gareth Kelly here, just from our perspective, Chair, from an external viewpoint, that post the amendments that Sharon has outlined, that we have no further comments on the annual governance statement, and it's in compliance and in line with our expectations.
right. Okay. So with your recommendation, can I recommend it to the committee that we accept this then? Can I just have a direction? Do I need a proposal and second for this?
Please, Chair, I would like a vote on this one, please, just for clarity.
Right.
You've moved it, Chair. If you get a seconded and then agreement from everyone in the committee.
Okay. Would you like Lee to make a roll call on it or not? You're quite happy with just agreements?
Happy with assent of the meeting.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
Chair, if we just get a seconder.
Chair, before we proceed to do a vote, it seems that there's quite a lot of aspirational stuff in here, like the references to the Centre for Public Scrutiny's work. It acknowledges that there's stuff in the pipeline, a lot of stuff which has been delayed. I think we would probably have liked to have seen more progress with some of this stuff. I'm quite new to Audit Committee, Chair. What's our role in ensuring that what's our role as a committee to ensure that these aspirations make their way into our work stream and that we are measuring against the items that are within here?
Well, I'm new to that part of it as well, so I'd like to ask then to point this at Sharon, if you could come in on that, please.
If I could just add one thing. We're saying that these things are important enough to the governance for them to be included within this statement. But yet, really, if those committees don't achieve that, do we just let these things disappear into the ether? So really, it's just a recognition of if these are important enough to be within this document, how we ensure their action. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell-Savers. I can keep you updated on the action plans. The governance one, as you're aware, is going to be reported overall to Council in any event. So although the work's being monitored by the Consultancy Review Group, the actual report will then go to Council. It will have overall oversight over that. But I'm quite happy to update members on anything to be any issues.
Right, so if I proposed it, do we have a seconder for acceptance?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on now to agenda item 7, which is your separate copy, if you've got the printed version, of the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report. Is Barry with us?
I am indeed, Chair. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Barry.
Okay. As highlighted in the report itself, the purpose of this particular item is to give members of the Audit Committee the opportunity to scrutinise the mid-year report prior to its submission to full council. The essential purpose of this report is to provide members with a summary of the council's treasury management activities during the first 6 months of the current financial year, along with other information which is relevant to assessing the performance of the treasury management function and demonstrating that we've complied with the agreed policies and practices, including particularly those that are set out in the council's treasury management strategy and its annual investment strategy for 2021. And in particular, that includes performance against the treasury and the prudential indicators which are required by SIPF's prudential and treasury management codes. In terms of the contents of the report, whatever the content follows the recommendations that are set out in SIPF's treasury management and prudential codes, and as such essentially covers 6 interrelated areas. The first of those is an update on the economic environment during the first 6 months of the current year. And this particular section just provides the economic context to the council's investing and borrowing activity by outlining some of the key economic issues that have impacted on financial markets during the year to date and have informed our interest rate forecasts. Secondly, we've actually got an update of the interest forecasts themselves and some of the key issues surrounding those forecasts, as well as details of the interest rate movements during the period, both for investment rates and for borrowing rates, as are set out in section 6 and 7. We also have a brief update on the treasury management strategy and investment strategy in sections 8 and 10. Alongside a summary of the council's investment and borrowing activities for the period April to September, which are covered in sections 9 and 11. And finally, we set a review of performance against the council's treasury and prudential indicators, as well as outlining updates to those indicators, which are set out in section 12 and in more detail in the accompanying appendix. From a scrutiny perspective, key questions for members in considering and reviewing this report. First of all, has the council complied with the approved strategies in respect of its investing and borrowing activity? Secondly, has it responded appropriately to changes in the economic outlook and developments in the financial markets to ensure that risks associated with treasury activities are being managed effectively? And thirdly, has the council operated within the limits and boundaries established by the prudential and treasury indicators which we set out at the start of the year in the treasury management and investment strategies? And the key objective of this report is to provide members with some positive assurances in respect of each of those questions. Contents-wise and format-wise, it's very similar to last year's mid-year update report and also the annual report. So in that respect, hopefully the content will be familiar and to make largely self-explanatory, albeit maybe a little bit technical and perhaps heavy going in places. So what I propose to do is just provide you with a very brief summary of some of the key messages. We can then do a quick page turn of the report and pick up any questions from members. I hope that's okay. Key messages wise, then bear in mind those 3 questions I referred to earlier. And I think there's probably 5 key messages for members to take from this report. First of all, in terms of investing activity, well, during the year to date, all investing activity has complied with the Council's approved strategy. So it's a continued emphasis on maintaining a low risk strategy, which is designed to ensure security of any sums invested in priority to liquidity and yield. Secondly, there were no breaches of the counterparty limits, which we set out in the Treasury Management Strategy. And those limits are established to limit our credit risk exposures associated with our investing activities. I will, however, draw your attention to paragraph 9.6, which refers to funding that was paid to the authority as part of central government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that meant for a limited time period, we had to suspend the authority's counterparty limit on deposits placed with HM Treasury's Debt Management Office. And so that was for a limited period and only occurred between the 1st and 7th of April. And that followed the receipt of in excess of £42 million worth of grants to fund payments of grants to local businesses. Borrowing wise, the council did not undertake any new borrowing or any debt rescheduling during the first 6 months of the year. Looking ahead, for the next 6 months, the revised capital budget allows borrowing for up to 7.2 million. That includes 1.4 million in respect of capital expenditure which we incurred in previous years. However, the forecasting that we completed as part of the budget monitoring up to the end of Q2 suggests that there are a number of planned capital schemes which are being funded from borrowing, which we're not expecting to see expenditure incurred during the current financial year. So if we remove those schemes from the calculation of the forecast borrowing, our expected maximum borrowing is more likely to be in the region of around 2.5 million. Economic development, performance of financial markets haven't required any changes to be made to the strategies. In terms of those economic developments, which are explained in section 4, without doubt, these have been dominated by the impact of COVID-19. The substantial fiscal and monetary policy measures being taken by governments and central banks, both in the UK and around the world, to counter the economic damage caused by the virus and the measures taken to contain it. In addition to the UK, I mean, Brexit, or more precisely, the outcome of trade negotiations between the UK and EU, also remains an issue, but I guess after dominating for so long, has certainly been pushed into second place by the impact of the pandemic. Turning to interest rates, then as far as the bank rate's concerned, then we saw that the Bank of England took emergency action back in March to cut the bank rate first to 0.25% and then to 0.1%. And since then, it has left bank rates unchanged. And looking ahead, the expected pace and the shape of economic recovery and expectations around inflation mean that current forecasts include no increase in bank rates over the forecast horizon. And sort of consistent with those expectations for the bank rates, we can safely say that investment yields, which have certainly been on a downward trend since March, are likely to remain exceptionally low throughout the current year and into the next financial year, indeed with little increase expected in the following 2 years. While the Bank of England itself has said that it's probably unlikely to introduce a negative bank rate, certainly in the near term, which sort of means the next 6 to 12 months, there are already some deposit accounts out there that are starting to offer negative rates for shorter periods. As for borrowing rates, then again, after falling to historic lows during the last financial year, rates have generally remained stable only sort of varying within a very narrow range during the first 6 months of the current year. And sort of looking ahead, the current forecast shows that, subject to any potential short-term volatility, there's likely to be little upward movement in rates over the next 2 years. And finally, as far as the Prudential and Treasury indicators are concerned, the Council has complied with the limits established by those indicators and set out in the Treasury Management Strategy, which was approved in March. Appendix 2 to the report provides further details, including updates to those indicators to take into account changes included in the revised revenue and capital budgets for 2021. And I've also included Table 7 in paragraph 12.10, which just provides a summary of the original and revised indicators for those indicators where our changes are required. So if you want to turn to the report now, and if you want to do a page turn, I'm happy to take any questions that members might have.
Yes, sir. Okay. Lee, have we anybody sticking their hand up?
Doesn't appear that way, Chair, no.
Councillor Campbell-Savers has a question.
Yeah, Councillor Campbell-Savers, yeah.
Mr. Lennox, thanks very much for that. If you were to pick 3 indicators that you believe that members of this committee should watch over the next few months, that you believe may be the ones that would have the biggest impact on us, what would they be? Where should we be looking between these meetings?
I think I would say is to be careful not to try and pick a limited selection of indicators, because they tend to provide a rounded picture of the capital programme, the impacts and the affordability of the capital programme. So I think to try and pick 2 and rank those above the other ones runs a sort of a risk with it. Obviously, one of the key considerations is with the capital programme is the affordability, and that's sort of the heart of what the prudential indicators are intended to cover. So in particular, is to be mindful of the size of the capital programme, and in particular the amount of capital expenditure that is to be met from borrowing, because that in itself will generate an impact on the revenue budget, both in terms of additional financing costs, i.e. interest costs, but also through the requirement to set aside an amount from revenue to repay the principal of any amounts borrowed. And also, one needs to take into consideration the fact that it is not just the finance costs where you see an impact of the capital programme, but inevitably capital expenditure brings with it ongoing revenue costs. For example, if you bought a building, that will then give rise to extra costs, be it repairs and maintenance, utility expenditure, and so on, but also the ability potentially to generate revenues from that expenditure as well. So I think my overriding answer to that question is that we need to consider all those together rather than to home in on any one or limited number of indicators.
So no particular areas that you feel that the nature of this council and the way we are currently structured puts us at any particular risk?
For the time being, I mean, I think there's nothing in there that at this point in time would start raising a red flag. I think I've said in the comments to the reports, you know, there's certainly things like you could look at the maturity structure of borrowing, saying yes, we've got some risks, but they're pushed quite a way into the future. We're talking sort of 20, 30 years time before those risks would crystallise. And I think I've said there that even within that time period, you know, there's potential opportunity to address those risks. That particular instance is just looking at the concentration of the amount of borrowing that would mature in that particular time frame. The issue there being that if you needed to refinance that debt, then you're obviously exposed to whatever the market was in terms of interest rates at that particular moment in time. But in addition to the time frame between now and then, what we also do as part of the MRP policy in setting aside amounts to repay debt is we've moved to align as best as possible the setting aside of those amounts from revenue with the profile of the repayment of debt. In other words, by matching them, when we do get to that maturity amount, we have already built up sufficient and set sufficient aside to cover that debt, and so there will be no requirement to refinance that debt, and thereby we've removed that refinancing risk.
Thank you.
Can I just come in there as well, please, Chair?
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, it was just to back up that point. I suppose that when you asked about the three indicators, Councillor Campbell-Savers and Barry mentioned there about affordability, particularly around the size of the capital programme, the amount of borrowing and the impact that it has on the revenue budget. I suppose just to emphasise that point, and is about if there's anything that as a council that we need to look at, it's how we prioritise that capital programme and around that affordability, and making sure we link that horizon vision that we've got in the strategy with the medium-term financial plan. So making sure that we focus on that affordability and making sure whatever we do when we decide in that capital programme with the limited resources which we have, and the point Barry's just made there about affordability and the impact on the revenue, is making sure we prioritise that, and whatever we do in our capital programme, that it delivers on the council's overall vision and the priorities that we want to, and the outcomes. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. Could I? Thanks, Catherine, for that. I mean, it's making you supporting that point makes me wonder: have you got particular concerns about the capital programme?
Not particular concerns. It's just that we need to, you look at the medium-term financial plan, and I think if you look at one of the recommendations in the audit findings report about financial sustainability, and we look at the budget strategy and the position that we're at and our long-term position, and we know that we've got budget gaps forecast, and we need to address those gaps, if we call them that, for the time being. And the one way to do that is to try and find a better link, I think, between the council plan, the medium-term financial strategy and the capital programme. So it's just, you asked about what would you prioritise or what would you most emphasise on, and I was just saying, yes, that thing around about affordability, because we haven't got lots of spare resources, if you like, that we can spend. And actually the reality is some of that will be borrowing in order to develop that capital programme, and it's just making sure that we can afford that affordability, so we're clear about the impact on the revenue going forward, but also making sure that we get the biggest return, so it matches the biggest priorities, and we get, it's a longer term vision. That's the point I was trying to make. Not that I've got any particular concerns.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So are there any more questions on agenda item 7? No? Okay, well, thank you, Barry, for that explanation. And now I'd like to go on to agenda item 8.
Chair, if I may, I would like to propose a procedural motion, please, that under section 4.20.10.f of the council's constitution, we adjourn the meeting. I think we need councillors to have more of an opportunity to look at some of the information around these next agenda items, and I don't think that there is sufficient time to consider and discuss them at this stage.
Right, so you're asking Councillor Campbell-Savers for an adjournment to adjourn the meeting before taking items 8, 9 and 10.
Indeed.
Yes. Do you have a seconder for that?
I'll second that, Councillor Tyson.
Right, thank you, Councillor Bainbridge. Well, certainly I will accept that motion that we adjourn the meeting under 4.20.10 F. And I think we're making plans to run the meeting, the remainder of the meeting on Thursday at 10 a.m. If I think that's correct, Lee, isn't it?
That's correct, Chair. If that's
thank you.
the meeting.
Thank you very much. So at this stage, then, I adjourn the meeting. Thanks everybody for attending. The main thing is we've had a fairly full attendance.